What is going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the bearded comic bro, and I am joined by comic creator JZP. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really appreciate a chance to be here with you, and looking forward to an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I got to check out a preview of your new series from Top Cow Image called Revolvers, and
yeah.
Holy cow, issue 1, I was like, I thought I knew where it was going. I have no idea where it was going.
Yeah, it's a little it kind of touches into a lot of the darkest parts of my soul, and fortunately enough, I had great collaborators, including Christian Dabari, who did the art. And when I first talked to them about the book, I said, here's where I'm going. I said, it's kind of Clive Barker Hellraiser meets John Wick meets kind of like a Michael Mann crime drama. And he basically told me I was crazy, and then he immediately said, I want to do it. And I was like,
want to clarify that you're a crazy person.
Yeah.
Right.
And he's a huge fan of like 80s horror and body horror, which this kind of gets into. Mm-hmm. It goes over the top. And what was great about working with Christian is that I never had to tell him to hold back. He would just rush forward into this thing. And the imagery he's come up with is phenomenal. He also brought a real rock and roll aesthetic to the piece that when I was originally writing it, I didn't have in my mind. I had a more, kind of Law and Order kind of mentality going into it with, a lot of horrific elements. And when he got hold of it and sent me the early drawings and some early sketches and some early concepts, it was really kind of heavy metal. It was like kind of like of an era.
Yeah.
And I looked at it, I went, wow, this is great. And so I fully embraced it, and he took it in that direction, and all credit to him for that.
It is an adventure for sure. I started reading it the first time, and it kind of gave me this like you said, that Michael Mann, that gritty, like a film noir, like the detective narrative. Like it was just, I was like, yeah. And then there's some imagery in there that I was like, woo, I did not see.
Yeah, the trick in all of that when you're writing it is you are kind of doing a little sleight of hand. Yeah. But we wanted to have a story that was kind of taking place in multiple realities, and the second reality that you face in the book, which gets expanded on and throughout the series, we really wanted that to be something that people that were fans of horror, fans of horror comics, horror movies, literature, it would be something that they would not only embrace, but hopefully find something new within. And and so, wherever you think the story is going, let me just tell you, you're wrong. The story is constantly shifting. So, but hopefully in a good way, hopefully in an entertaining way.
Yeah, well, we kind of have talked about it, and we kind of talked about comparisons. Someone hasn't gotten to check this out yet because by the time we're recording this interview, it hasn't officially dropped yet. So, right. What is Revolvers really about?
Yeah, so Revolvers is basically the story of a Detroit homicide detective named Hampton Wales, and Hampton has been trying to get hold of this fairly powerful sort of like cartel-like villain named La Piton, the Python. And he's been, dealing a lot of drugs and killing people and doing all kinds of stuff within the city. And they finally have a beat on him. And they go to get him. And things go horribly awry. And when the dust settles, Hampton is dead. And that's where the story really kicks in.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those kind of like ethereal mystery stories as well, because Hampton's trying to figure out exactly what happened to him, but he finds himself trapped in this alternate reality known as the Moratorium. And the Moratorium is sort of like our version of purgatory, but if everybody was John Wick. So everybody in there has guns, and everybody in there is gunning for Hampton. So that's kind of in general terms. And then in the larger narrative, it's about Hampton trying to solve a number of things that existed in his life And as he comes to the resolution on those within the moratorium, he starts to figure out the larger story. And so if you're a fan of detective type stories, this is for you. If you're a fan of horror, this is definitely for you. There's a little bit of police procedural in there. So if you like that kind of stuff, it's for you as well. Yeah.
That's so cool. Well, and it was, this was my first exposure to your work as a writer. And I was just blown away by your writing style and the scripting of issue 1, how it flows and the dialogue and how you're interchanging the story from where you're taking it, past and present. And, like you said, and so I was really engaged and intrigued by that. So
I really do appreciate that. It's very kind of you to say. I thank you. I try and make my stories and all the storytelling that I've been doing. So I've been writing for almost 30 years now, and video games and movies and all kinds of stuff. But fortunately, this is kind of new for me. I've known Matt Hawkins for a long time. My partner at Epitome, a guy named Rich Leibowitz, encouraged me to do this and said, you should write some comics. And so the first comic I wrote was Saint Mercy, and that did fairly well for Image and Top Cow. I'm working on a series 2 on that right now. And then I had this story for Revolvers kind of stewing for a while. And Rich and Matt and I talked about it. And we thought, we could do this. It's going to be interesting. And so for me, it was a chance to kind of explore the darkest recesses of my imagination. And I really had a fun time doing it. And and I really enjoy the process of writing and creating. So once I started to dive into this thing, it was just like, okay, I got to do it now. It's going to have to happen. So.
Yeah. So, you mentioned that you've been writing for 30 years, doing a lot of video games, scripts, as well as movies and stuff. How did you get into writing?
That's a great question. I had no intention of being a writer. I didn't study it. I didn't go to school for it. In fact, I'm a junior college dropout. I started at Universal Studios. I live here in Los Angeles. I started at Universal Studios as a tour guide. And so I was fortunate enough to get a job as a tour guide at Universal. And while I was there working as a tour guide, that gave me kind of all access to the studio. And so on my days off, I'd put on my uniform and I'd go down and I'd watch people film stuff and go into TV show production offices and bring my heavily padded resume. Hey, I want to work for you, And so after about 1.5 years of doing that, I got an opportunity to be a PA, which is the lowliest of the low, basically a gopher. But on a TV show. And I jumped at the opportunity. And over 7 years, I was able to move up from being a PA to being an assistant production coordinator, then a production coordinator. I did some post-production supervising. And so I was working on crew, basically below the line. The show that I was working on called Harry and the Hendersons was about a family that lived with a Bigfoot. And so it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But we had a commitment for 72 episodes. And one of the scripts came in one day, and I was reading the script, and I was like, I could do this. And so I went to one of the producers, and I said, I think I can write one of these. And he said, yeah, prove it. And so I ended up writing a spec for Seinfeld, because that's basically what you have to do is you have to write a spec of something that people know.
Yeah.
So that they can read it and go, oh, yeah, he captured the voice of George. I can see how this would be a Jerry thing, that sort of stuff. So I ended up writing a spec Seinfeld, and he gave me the opportunity. He said, yeah, you can write some of our scripts. So I ended up writing a couple episodes of Harry and the Hendersons, and that sort of kicked off a career in writing. And then I was producing visual effects for a company called Stargate, and we were working on a number of Sega projects at the time. And Sega came to us and said, you guys should make a game. And everybody looked at me and said, John, you know how to write a game. And I was like, okay. And I was off and that started a career. And since then, I've written about 80 video games, written a couple features, a couple of books, novelizations, textbooks. Now the comics. My current projects include Jurassic World Evolution. So I do a lot of stuff in the Jurassic World space, and really love that franchise. So
yeah,
so I wake up every day and thank the gods, however you pray, that I get to do this for a living, because I'm so grateful that I've kind of stumbled into this career and found something I was good at, and people are willing to compensate me for it. So
Yeah, well,
works out okay.
I love that's why I love asking about origin stories, because
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for them. I love to hear, but like to hear the, just like, look, this is what I wanted to do. I said I'm gonna do it and went out and did it. Like that's
Yeah, and it's interesting because sometimes you don't find what you really are passionate about until it kind of presents itself to you, and I'd always been a storyteller. One of the reasons I was a tour guide is I could tell stories. I could, you can give me any subject and wind me up and I can speak on it for an hour, whether I know about it or not. And I've always had this, this gift, if you will. And I think I got it from my father. My father was a very good storyteller. So I had this ability to tell stories, and I understood how characters work, and I understand how setups and payoffs work, and story arcs and character journeys. I kind of had that all kind of internalized. What I didn't know was, could I actually put it on the page, or now put it on the screen, right? And I kind of had to go through that process and discover whether I was capable of doing it. And once I realized I was, then it became a journey of continually honing that craft, trying to get better at it. A lot of people approach this as art, and I'm cool with that because we are artists on a level. But I look at more as a craft, something that I work on every day and I try and get better at. Even to this day, I'm still learning stuff, but I'm always continually pushing myself and pushing the envelope of what I think I can do creatively. And Revolvers is a great example of that. That was a bit of a high wire act for me, but ultimately it was really satisfying when I put it together.
That's so cool. You said that, that you're kind of newer into the world of comics. That your first one, you just did, and you're working on the second series of that. Was this like a new exposure? Like, did you even read comics growing up as a kid, or was this kind of like a whole new world for you?
No, this wasn't a new world for me. I've worked with comic artists throughout the years. Big fan of comics. I actually, my favorite comic of all time was Dark Knight Returns, and then got a chance to meet Frank Miller through a mutual friend, a guy named Flint Dilley, who actually showed up in one of Frank's comic books, graphic novels, 300. He's actually the character of Dilius in 300. Oh, that's so I've been exposed to it. I was also a big fan of anime. I loved the stuff that was coming out like in the 80s. And I was a big fan of Ghost in the Shell and Akira and all of those things. So I was a little bit embathed in it, if you will.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I had never really attempted it myself. And the thing about writing is that storytelling is storytelling. There are truths of storytelling that you have to hit regardless of the medium you're working in. But then there's also a different reality, which is learning the specific beats and pauses and breaths, if you will, that comic books require. And things that I can get away with in a screenplay, I couldn't get away with in the graphic novels. And I'm more comfortable writing in screenplay format. So I wrote everything first as sort of a screenplay format, and then converted it all to comic book format. Cool. And I got great feedback from Matt Hawkins, who's a phenomenal writer, as well as the head over there at Image with Mark Silvestri, and Matt would write me back and say, "This is great. It's 50% more than you need," and I would read it and go, "Yeah, I'm not leaving any space for Christian's art here. It's going to be filled. Troy's going to be filling up the entire panel of text." And I thought, I've got to figure this out. So I really spent some time, thinking about what my voice for a comic book would be, as opposed to what my voice for, say, a game would be. Yeah. When I write a game, I might write a game and the script might be 2,000 pages. I might be writing 5, 6, 7,000 lines of dialogue. And so, no one ever says, "Oh, that's too much." Right? It's like, yeah, give us all you can. But in a comic book, you have to remember that, for me anyway, I had to remember that I'm sharing the page with a lot of other stuff, and I need to make sure that everything has room to breathe. So that was a bit of a challenge initially. But once I got into the rhythm of it, it was super exciting to write.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you, what the difference is of writing for like a video game versus writing a comic, and you kind of hit on that a little bit. But
I can tell you one of the big challenges for writing a video game is that you have to be able to repeat yourself in different ways over and over and over again. So for instance, like on something like Jurassic World, we might have a character, let's say Ian Malcolm says, your dinosaurs are looking thirsty, which is you need to give your dinosaurs some water. Well, I've got to figure out 7 or 8 ways for him to say that. Okay. And then that's basically that's instruction to the player. So I have to figure out 7 or 8 ways that he can say that don't sound corny or non-repeating, that they're interesting, they're engaging. And you go, okay, well, that's fine. But we have 6 characters that are talking to you that are all going to say the same thing. So I need to have 5 other characters say the same thing, but say it in their character voice and say it 7 different ways. So now you get to, okay, so now I've got 6 times 7 characters doing this, right? So I've got all of those dialogue to write. And that's 1 line of dialogue. There might be 250 instruction lines that need to go in that script.
Wow.
So yeah, so you find yourself literally writing thousands and thousands of lines of dialogue, and you're doing your best to keep them in character, to keep them informative, to keep them engaging enough that the player is going to be okay with hearing it, and to not repeat yourself. And that's a challenge. So that's one of the difficulties of writing video games that people don't think about is is how you do it. And it does become a skill set in and of itself. Yeah.
That's so funny because I never would have, I just imagined like, oh, you're going through like a script still of, because you're still telling a story through the video game.
Of course, yeah.
But the idea of, oh, well, yeah, you've got some characters that say something, but if they decide to be the other character and you have to have it that's insane.
Yeah, you end up you end up juggling a lot of balls in your head, if you will, about the story and trying to remember who's doing what when, and if this happens, can that happen? A lot of that gets planned out. So there is we have templates and stuff we work off so we can kind of see where we are.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a challenge, and there's a story dialogue, there's cutscenes, there's incidental dialogue, there's instructional dialogue. You have to kind of put it all together, and sometimes the scripts can be huge. A normal screenplay would be anywhere from maybe 90 pages up to maybe 120 pages. That's how big a screenplay is. But a game script can be sometimes thousands of pages. Wow. It can look like a phone book. Wow. And it's just because of all of the possible things that can happen in the game. So yeah, it's a different challenge.
Yeah, it sounds like it for sure. So yeah. You've been in this world of writing with the video games and movies and, like you said, books and stuff. And you said you had a friend that kind of suggested, dipping your toe into the comic world. How did that kind of process come about for you? So
yeah, my partner the guy that runs a company called Epitome, he and I are longtime friends, and we've done stuff over the years. And he's been my manager at various points in my career. And so we have a long relationship, and we've been developing a lot of properties, and we started developing and are continuing to develop a property for Paramount, A Quiet Place, which is terrific, amazing property. And as we were kind of now moving more into sort of this action horror realm, Rich came to me and said, it'd be cool if we maybe start developing some of these intellectual properties in spaces other than games. How do you feel about us reaching out to Matt and seeing if Matt would be interested in working with us on a comic book? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I've known Matt for a number of years. In fact, Matt wrote a comic adaptation of one of my games called Fear Effect about 20 years ago. Oh, nice. And so we reached out to Matt. We pitched him some, early ideas of what we were thinking about for the comics, and he was incredibly supportive. And and said, yeah, go for it. Let's see what you guys create. And so my initial book, Saint Mercy, Matt was so awesome on that, because I basically put together the first book and sent it to him, and he sent me back some notes and said, this is working, adapt this, change that. But the notes were more sort of comic book centric rather than content centric. And he was right on. He was spot on with his notes. And so we did the notes and sent it back to him. He said, yeah, you've got a book here. Let me get you a great artist. And then he connected me to Attilio Rojo, who was a huge fan of Mesoamerican and Central American mythologies and peoples. And so he was excited right away as soon as he saw the content. And we were off and running.
That's
Yeah, and that's kind of how I kind of started dipping my toe into the comic space.
So with you have an idea for a comic, I feel like it's got to be different way to come in about it than like for a game or something, because like your Jurassic Park is already a world that's been created. You have to kind of dive into it. So how, like, let's go with the Revolvers, for example. How did you come up with the idea of Revolvers?
Yeah, so the idea of Revolvers basically had been bouncing around in my head for a while. I start almost every idea from a character-centric look. So a lot of people might start and say, okay, well, I'm going to think about the world first, and then I'll find characters to fit in that world. But for me, I always want to start with the character, because I think that ultimately what drives stories are characters. What people care about, what you get interested in, the emotional investment is always going to be, do I like this character, or am I interested in this character enough? And so I started bouncing around this idea of Hampton in my head. And I was like, I don't want to do a super clean cop. I want to do a guy who's trying to do the right thing, but is willing to look the other way. And, he's trying to be a good cop while he's cheating on his wife. And, he's kind of like, he's a complex character, right? And yeah, to a certain degree, these came out of things like, go back and look at Al Pacino's character from Heat and the complexities of that character. And I thought, yeah, that's an interesting cop story, but what am I going to do with it? I'm now, all I've got really is a cop story. And then I was probably inspired by some reading I had done. And I started to think a lot about this idea of, well, what would happen if that character wasn't alive? What if he was dead? What if he was some sort of ghost? What if he was some sort of reincarnated character? What would that world look like and feel to him? And what would be a journey I could put this character on? And then we were talking probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago, before I'd written the script. And we were just kind of spitballing during the meeting. And Rich said to me, oh, this sounds like John Wick with ghosts. This is like John Wick Ghost World. And the moment he said that, I said, I've got it. It was just like inspiration hit. And I was like, I know what I want to do with this character now. And so, yeah, that's sort of how it came about. But when I'm trying to develop stories and concepts, I always start with the character. I always start there, because ultimately, I think if you have a strong character, you can put them into interesting situations and interesting worlds, and your story is going to be fantastic. But you need that character. You need, the comic book business is basically all about characters and superheroes. And you have to ground your content and surround your content around an interesting character. And so that's what I tried to do. And I find that kind of holds true with almost every content piece that I create.
Nice. So, and I saw in the solicits, it's right now it's a 4-issue series.
Correct.
And is this, I know it's like, sometimes it depends on sales and things I know, and you got to make sure you have a contained story. Is this a world though that you'd like to explore more? Or are you like, no,
oh yeah,
I'm okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The world of the moratorium, and there's a central piece in the moratorium called the Gyre, which is basically like a Middle Ages torture machine. Meets your worst nightmare standing 20 stories tall. And because I come from a game background as well, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if this world was sort of like a battle royale, where it's constantly forcing all of the people that reside within it to fight one another. And then every time you lose, every time you die, even though you're dead, every time you die, when you come back a little worse for wear. And so there are people that are within the moratorium who look basically human. And there are people within the moratorium that have functionally become demonic entities because they've ground through the system so many times. And so you always come back worse than you started. And I thought, okay, that's kind of a very cool story beat, but that also has implications when we create a game, where we could say, okay, we've got a game mechanic that's reliable and that everybody likes and that we could work on or start from anyway. And so there is a battle royale component to that. And once you've kind of got that, you can go, okay, well, we can tell the story of Hampton Wales and all the characters that surround him, but there's all kinds of other stories we can tell in this world as well. And so, yeah, I hope we'll get to explore more.
Yeah, awesome. And when is this book dropping for people want to check out Revolvers?
Yeah, so the first book comes out October 5th. and then it'll be a monthly release for the 4 issues. It is a completely self-contained story that gets you a beginning, middle, and end. Hopefully you won't see it coming when you do get to book 4. There's some mystery in there and things to solve. The book starts out pretty intense and just gets more crazy and more intense as it goes. So yeah, by the time you get to book 4, you're in the realm of insanity. and you know, like I said, hopefully for folks that enjoy this kind of entertainment, they're gonna dig it. And there is an unfolding mystery throughout the book that you can maybe figure out. I drop clues all along the way, so hopefully you'll figure it out. But if you don't, hopefully it'll be a fun reveal for you. And we are looking at extending the comic beyond just the page or the digital release. We're going to be looking at doing some other materials to support it. That'll be kind of happening towards the end of the year, beginning of next year. So,
oh, cool.
Yeah,
it makes sense because you have such a diverse, you know, background of writing that you probably can dabble in a couple other mediums with stuff. That
yeah, absolutely. And I've been fortunate enough to be part of a creative team. You know, the thing is about these books or game or TV show or film or whatever you might be working on, it only works if you can collaborate with really talented people. And I was super fortunate in that Matt connected me with Christian. Christian has a colorist named Simon Go, who basically does pretty much all of his coloring for him. And Simon just completely saturated the pages in the most delicious colors. And you've seen the book, so you know there's a lot of variety, and the book itself is, I think, just kind of gorgeous the way it's been drawn and the way it's been colored. And then I was very fortunate to work with Troy for the lettering, you know, and Troy was patient with me in ways that he might not have been with other comic book writers, because, you know, I'm sure I probably gave him a few times where he went, oh crap, but he figured out how to make it work, and that you know, that's to his credit, huge. And so, you know, and then being supported by Matt and Rich and the whole team at Epitome and Top Cow, Alina, you know, and Vince, the people there are terrific. Yeah. And so, yeah, so it just makes it easier. It doesn't make it easy, because doing this is never easy, right, but it makes it easier. And it's nice to know that that people have your back, you know, and people are supporting what you're doing, and people are excited by what you're creating. It makes, when you're working, you know, at 3 o'clock in the morning, banging away at the keyboard, it keeps you going, you know, it keeps you motivated. And so, yeah, I'm thrilled to be part of this team, and I'm really excited by what we've done with Revolvers.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned that, like, that, you know, it starts out intense and it just gets more and more intense.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to be on the background of, like, when, like, you send the script to them, like, holy buckets. Cause, like, the first issue, like, you're right, it's so intense from the beginning and it just builds and builds. And I'm like,
it keeps going.
Gonna do it like that, I guarantee.
So basically, you know, I would write each of the books and then send them. So there's four initial books that make up the series 1. And when I sent the first book, everyone was like, okay. And each book sort of ends on a little bit of a cliffhanger, a little bit of a pull into the next book. And when I got to book 2, everyone went, oh my God. And when I got to book 3, they said, stop it. When I got to book 4, they're like, you're just out of your fucking mind. And yet everybody dug it. You know, it was one of those things where yeah, I'm kind of turning it in, go, you know, please don't read between the lines and try and figure out my mental state, you know, but it was fun. You know, it was fun to do that, to kind of go and explore some of your darkest, you know, thoughts. Yeah. And turn those into content and turn those into something interesting. And you know, it all is of a piece. It all kind of comes together to mean something. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you know, it was, you know, hitting send on the email was a little bit nerve-wracking at times, because I'm like, what are they going to think? Okay, boom.
And I always got done now.
Right. I always got a back encouragement. And part of it for me is, when I commit to a genre or I commit to an idea, I don't want to half-ass it. You know, I wasn't going to do this book as a PG-13 book, right? I wasn't going to go and say, okay, this is family-friendly material. It's not. I said, I want to make this for fans of horror. I want to make this for fans of adult violence. You know, there's sex in there. There's all kinds of stuff going on in that book. And I thought, I'm not going to back away from this.
Yeah.
I'm going to embrace it, because I think you have to. Otherwise, you're not honoring what you create. You're not being true to the characters you've envisioned. You have to embrace, you have to embrace what you're creating and dive in feet first. And that's what I did.
That's so cool. Like I was wondering the whole time, like in prepping for this interview, of like, do you have a sweet spot for like what you really dig writing? Is it more in the games? Is it more in the comics, or you're just like,
Yeah,
like it all?
honestly, I like it all. I really do. And
Yeah.
I write all kinds of stuff. So I've written children's games. I've written stuff that would be family friendly, put it on Nickelodeon. And then I've written the hardest, violence that you could read. I enjoy the process of creation. For me, the idea of creating something and putting a character into a world and giving them some adventure to go on. For me, that's super exciting. I don't. Sometimes you see on things like Facebook or whatever, somebody say, explain what you do for a living in 5 words or less, right? Yeah. And so I went on there and I said, I create people and problems. And that's kind of what you do when you're a content creator or a writer. You kind of imagine people and then you put them into difficult situations and see what happens. And that for me is exciting. And I like doing it with all kinds of characters and all kinds of worlds. I like female heroes. I like male heroes. I've written probably more female heroes than male heroes over my career. I like different cultures, different parts of the world. I love different mythologies to tap into and see what you can find that can inspire you to create a story of your own. So I'm kind of all over the place. But if it excites me, if I'm excited by the story, I'm excited by the character, I'm motivated to do it. Yeah.
Well, JZP, I mean, I feel like I could talk to you and ask you questions about this stuff forever, but I want to respect, your time and stuff, because you sound very busy. So obviously we're pumping up Revolvers, right now.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you're working on that you want to talk about, or are you like, this is it right now? This is my main focus.
So right now I'm working on series 2 for Saint Mercy. So that's something, if you haven't checked out Saint Mercy, please go give it a look. It's now available in trade paperbacks. You can get the whole thing. And it's a really interesting story about 2 young women that are both heroic in their own way. And there's a sort of like parallel timelines in that. So it's something I enjoy doing. It's sort of parallel universes and parallel timelines. And then please check out Revolvers. If you're a fan of Jurassic World or Jurassic Park and haven't yet played Jurassic World Evolution, we're on basically Evolution 2 of the game right now. There's a lot of downloadable content that's available. It's a fantastic game by Frontier Developments, great developer. Please check that out. And then there's some unannounced projects that I'm working on that will hopefully announce within the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Oh, cool.
I'm the only John Zuur Platten in the world. So if you search for me, you'll basically find news as it comes. And if you have any questions or ideas or things you want to talk about regarding comic books, you can reach out to me through Facebook and friend me if you'd like. I'll do my best to respond. I am busy, but I'll do my best to respond. I feel very fortunate that I've found my way to a space that a lot of people want to be in. And I'm grateful that I get to do this. So to the extent that I can share knowledge or information, I'm happy to do so. And then it's just, staying busy and knocking stuff out. That's the goal.
Yeah. So it sounds like the best way for people to just follow along with what you're doing is Facebook, or just check out online.
Yeah. Check out online. I don't tweet much. I have a Twitter account, but I don't think I've used it in a couple of years. The Twitter is where people go to get fired, and I just prefer not play that game. But I do try and post information about what I've got going on Facebook, LinkedIn, of course. If you're interested in what I'm doing, interested in what Epitomy's doing or what Top Cow's doing, we've got a lot of fun stuff in the pipeline. So please watch for us.
Well, thank you so much just for taking a little bit of your day to talk about comics and the process of writing with me. It's been a blast.
Well, thank you very much. And it's great. And, we don't do this and we can't do this without you guys. if there's not people there to read the work, to enjoy the work, to promote the work, we don't exist. So thank you for being there, and thank you for sharing it with your fans and your audience. And I'm happy to come back and talk with you anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to have some more conversations, because I feel like after book 4 comes, I'm gonna have to talk to you and be like, all right, we got.
Yeah, you're either gonna love me or hate me, but depending on how it all resolves. But yeah, I'd be very, very, very happy to talk with you about it again.
Awesome. So, well, thanks again, and make sure you all, if you're watching or if you're listening on the podcast, go check out Revolvers. October 5th is when it comes out. Pick it up at your, LCS, and go support, this book. You're in for a wild ride. So
thank you.
With that being said, gang, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.